Welcome into the Toyota Lounge for the DNVR Avalanche podcast, powered by your Front Range Toyota dealerships.
Is that a question?
Yeah, I don't know. My inflection on that was really weird. I don't know what happened there. But
Welcome in.
Welcome in.
I guess.
We're here.
Is that how you greet people that come to your house? Welcome in, I suppose.
When people show up unannounced, yeah, I guess.
Does that happen often?
No, not where I live. Nobody's coming out there, dude.
All right, I'm going to drop by your house later.
Sure.
And you'll just be like, welcome in?
Hi. We don't say it. You wouldn't be able to hear us over our dog anyway, so
Yeah.
fine.
The Rex alarm would go off.
Some Avs news today that we'll get into first. First of all, the preseason schedule was announced. If you care about that, it's the same three teams that they play every year twice. Once at home, once away. Dallas, Vegas, and now Utah instead of Arizona.
There are media people in Denver that don't cover the Avalanche, like, seriously.
Yep.
That saw that and were like, look at the NHL trying to push Utah and Colorado. And I was like, oh, no, guys, they do this every year. It's literally the same schedule every year.
Buddy, just so you guys know, this was stamped, sealed, delivered, written contract, done. Probably last August.
Yeah, like,
So I'm just telling you how it works. Like, it's just done. Yeah, it was all done. Signed, sealed, delivered.
Yeah. They've been
A year ago.
They've been doing this schedule with these three teams for half a decade, since the Frozen Fury ended, basically.
yeah.
So
Minnesota has been in there
that's true.
as well, but when Vegas came into the league, it was like,
Yeah.
now it's Vegas every year, not Minnesota.
Well, we used to play the Kings in Vegas, right? When the
Yep.
Kings didn't.
Frozen
Vegas
Fury
didn't
was always
exist.
fun,
Yeah,
man.
that
They
was
would
fun.
play in the
MGM.
the MGM, that tiny ass arena.
That's fun.
It was fun.
And then before that, it was on the Thomas and Mack.
There's
And then before that, because I'm old, it was at the Caesar's Palace outside with the ice melting. The game didn't finish.
that was a long time ago.
Yeah, I'm old. Thank you.
I mean, if you take anything from this, their last preseason game is October 5th, so you're probably looking around an NHL start around October 10th again this year. Neat.
Yeah, for our purposes, it's more interesting that if you work backwards from their preseason, we're probably looking at a September 20th start of training camp,
Yep.
September 18th or 19th media day, physicals at the rink, all that stuff.
Yep.
And then immediately before that would be
Rookie tournament.
the rookie camp, and then the weekend
Face-off.
before would be the rookie face-off in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So working backwards from all those things.
So September will be fun, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it always is. We always have a good time with
course.
those events. It's always a good time.
Where's the face-off this year?
LA.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, sorry.
So there's that news, and then the other thing of note related to the Avalanche, a couple of trade target boards popping up with Ross Colton's name on it today. I don't know how much I believe in that.
Look, I traded him in my bold trades the other day.
From a pure standpoint of, hey, if the Avs are looking to cut costs a little bit, maybe you really, really believe in Cal Ritchie or something to make the team.
No, I just think that I think this is an interesting jumping off point for today, though. Ross Colton makes $4 million.
He does.
And
He also gave you 40 points last year.
You care about your center depth a lot. But Ross Colton is not what you would call a defensive stopper.
That's true.
And they didn't even find a fourth line center last year. They went out and got a wing out of Nashville and pretended he was a fourth line center.
They just chose to close their eyes and believe he was a center for 2
exactly.
months.
That was it. And so it's okay if you're going to try and save money on a position that you think might be a touch expensive. Third line center is a good place to start. Would you rather you're a third line center, or would you rather like a Josh Manson or Sam Girard, where now you're pulling from your second D pairing? Which one's more valuable to you?
I mean, can I circumnavigate the question by saying
No.
unless you really need all of that $4 million, just move Miles Wood instead?
How much money would you save on Miles Wood if you move him, though? Because it's only 2.5.
Obviously less. And that's my point. Is there's a hard question for me to answer without knowing what the Avs end up doing with that money.
Yeah, but you're probably going to struggle to find like $1 million third line center,
unless it's Cal Ritchie.
So $3 million. You save $3 million is your best case scenario. You save $3 million on that deal.
Yep.
Because then you have to replace him. So what? If you spend $3 million on a third line center, you've saved $1 million?
How big of a deal is that really?
That's a roster spot. But is it worth it? What is the downgrade from Ross Colton to whoever you go and get? Ross Colton signed for the next 3 years. That $3 million or that $4 million contract that he is on is only going to look better over the course of it. And I have been of the belief that Ross Colton is going to have a much better second season as a full-time center in Colorado than he did first, where the first 40 games he's kind of just wandering around. You know, he really was trying to figure it out. And I don't understand why the coaching staff did not use him more on the PK. He's their best face-off guy. He's their most consistent face-off guy. Even if you just do that, use him for the face-off and then he hops off and, you know, you try and figure it out from there. It at least gives you a chance. With Cogs, you're losing it.
Like 70% of the time,
right?
You're losing it.
You're just losing it.
I am not favorable of Colton being the trade target, and it's just because with what the market for centers feels like around the league right now. Like Yakov Trenin is an interesting part of the conversation because he isn't a career centerman, and you see the projected contract that he's expected to fetch in free agency, and it's kind of Ross Colton money. It's comparable. And in looking at the Avs situation specifically, they never solved the 4C. So that will be 2 question marks going into the year that we already saw the effect it had on the rest of the lineup, not having a really complete fourth line. You don't want to start sacrificing the third line either. And so I worry about what kind of return, to AJ's point, is really saving you money that doesn't make you worse, because we knew the Ross Colton contract was going to feel rich in year 1, and the payoff was going to be years 2 through 3, hopefully into 4.
Yeah.
And I want to acknowledge the year that Ross Colton had. I think people don't realize on an individual level the trajectory and the direction that he's heading is upwards. It's a career high in points.
Yep.
And it's a great possession year in terms of scoring chances for, which is reflected by the career high in points. And that is with added responsibility. So he's able to keep that production going with an increased role on the Avs compared to Tampa. Similarly, at the faceoff dot, one of the best faceoff guys for the Avs, especially by Avs standards. But in my opinion, a career high at the faceoff dot, because his 56% year in Tampa only took 189 faceoffs. He took 820 last year and managed 51.6.
That's a jump.
It's a huge jump. It's a very big personal year of growth for Ross Colton as he's adapting to more of a full-time center position, which is going to require some adaptation, but I think he handled it extremely well. And all of those things put together track with what I think the Avs organization expected from him in year 1, potentially even exceeding expectation to some extent. I've personally felt in the way that Bednar spoke about him that this was a player he really liked. That was evident when Ross Colton was getting more ice than Ryan Johansson. And that's maybe a bit unfair to use it in that way. But all that put together with like where Trenin is projected to go in terms of what he's expected to fetch for a contract, I think that's a warning. That should come as a warning, not to part ways with Ross Colton too eagerly. Obviously, if the return is something incredible, that makes sense for the Avs, because all of this probably comes about directly connected to the Casey Middlestat conversation. And that's fair. If you are going to probably spend a little bit of money on a true second-line center, which they also have been hurting for a little bit now, I can understand why this name is being floated around as a potential trade piece. But altogether, I wouldn't move on from Ross Colton too eagerly.
Well, here's the way I'm going to talk about it. I like Ross Colton. I do. Ross Colton, where he's at in his career, so he's entered what I call the meat market. He has. And what do I mean by that? Think of it, because I like food. I compare it to food, right? Think of it as a burger, right? There's the bun that's on the top and the bun at the bottom. Guys at the bottom are entry-level guys. If you're performing, you're not getting rid of those guys because you need those guys to fit in your salary cap. Logan O'Connor's the perfect bun. Perfect. Cheap, effective. You're not getting rid of him because it doesn't make sense. Because he performs for you and he doesn't cost you money. And then on the top bun, you got, McCarr, McKinnon, Ranta. They're not being traded. They're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So what does that leave you? I mean, it leaves you the meat. You know what I mean? Which is in the middle. So Ross Colton's in the meat of his career. He's not an entry-level guy out of college anymore, the American League. He got that contract. Now he's in this $4 million range. Sammy falls into this. Guys like that, right? So when you enter that stage of your career and you are right there, right in the meat, if the team is going to make changes, usually it's the meat that goes. Whether you like them or not, or, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't mean that you don't like them. It's just that the way that the cap is nowadays and you have to make moves. Let's say the Avs were going to go and make a trade for a goalie or whatever, like people are speculating. It won't be the buns. The Avs need the bottom bun to make their roster work, to make their salary cap. It won't be one of their top guys because they're the best in the world. Why would you get rid of your best players and they're performing? It's going to be guys in the meat. And Ross Colton, I can see. And I'm not saying that CMAC has called teams on Ross Colton. I'm saying Frank Severelli today, right? He kind of throws it out there, And I'm not saying he doesn't know people. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this, but it's logical because it's a logical name that fits in what I call the meat market.
Yeah, you need
right.
You need cost efficiency on your roster, and a $4 million third line center is a tough sell sometimes. Regardless of how good Ross Colton is, unless Ross Colton is pushing to be a second line caliber of center,
which he won't be with Middlestat.
Yeah, which he won't be. It is not a position that you look at and say, this is a cost efficient. At best, you're saying, we're getting what we're paying for. The Avs got what they paid for with Ross Colton last year of $4 million.
Yep.
That's great.
Yep.
But needing that money, if they have a solution for a cost-efficient guy that could come in at maybe $2 million, that's
it.
Then if you can recoup the pick that they got last year, the 37th pick, I think is what it cost them to get Ross Colton.
Sounds right, yeah.
If you can recoup that pick and then use it for another guy to go get a cost-efficient third line center or another defender or two players that can fill your lineup at $1 million, then you have to consider that. It's not necessarily about the Avs are going to have to make moves that when you look at them on paper, you're saying they're going to lose these deals.
Yep.
It's about saving money.
And for the record, I like Ross, and I wouldn't get rid of Ross. That's not what I'm saying. But you're at a stage of your career. We had a guy on the other day that your mom liked, Mike Ricci. I'm going back to the old, casualty of the exact same thing. Well liked by the players, well liked by management. My dad loved them. Had to get rid of them. And I'm not. Sometimes it's just that's
just
where
money.
you are. And as a player, you do understand that, and that's where you are in your career, and you're susceptible to being moved.
My problem with this
sucks.
is I think it's hard for the Avs to do this in the off season. Not the money side of it, but looking at what they've built. They've worked so hard to build that center depth. And, maybe the right deal is out there. Maybe there's a guy out there they're confident they can get, and it starts to make more sense.
Yeah.
But you look at Ross Colton, what Megan talked about, really what Ross Colton did offensively last year seems pretty darn sustainable for the guy. Scored 17 goals on 11.5% shooting, which is a little bit below his career average. So you can expect him to continue to provide that offensive side for the Avalanche. And I struggle to see them getting close to as good of quality out of a player for cheaper when they're moving out Colton at center. I think it's going to be easier to find cheaper, cost-effective guys at the wings than at center. Center has always been a premium position that teams pay extra for.
It's just he's the only guy that you look at on the roster and say, relative to his position, he's probably just a touch expensive right now. That's it.
Where I could see some of that saved money, potentially if they're moving him out for a more cost-effective 3C, is Jonathan Drouin money to have a second-line winger that you already know you love.
I don't... you have to, if you're going to do that, because I fully believe that's what this is about, if that's the decision that you make, you have to have a plan. You can't
For sure.
You can't move Colton and then be like, okay, well then we'll figure it out. You have to
Yeah.
have some dominoes lined up,
Yeah.
Right.
to make to engage in that series of moves.
Yep.
Because I agree. I think that's what this is about.
Well, is domino-sized hail a thing? Does that count?
Yes.
I'm sure.
Some square hail falling on your house? That'd probably be pretty
Domino's
bad.
pizza size
Well,
hail.
You're definitely going to need a new roof at that point.
Yeah.
So
You
make
in
sure you go
trouble.
get with Red Hawk Roofing. Not just for after the hail damage happens, but also for checking out your roof at any time. They have a free inspection that they can give you. They'll come out, they'll get on your roof, they'll take pictures. They'll show you where your roof is at currently. Hopefully it comes back all great and your roof is good to go. But if there is damage or there are problems, they'll let you know about them. You don't have to get it replaced right away, but at least you will be aware of what's going on thanks to Red Hawk Roofing. And they do, of course, replace those roofs if you do ultimately need it to get replaced. They even do have emergency services available 24/7 if something crazy like domino-sized hail does happen to you. So go get with Red Hawk Roofing at redhawkroofing.com. They're a local Colorado company just like us here at DNVR, and they're great at what they do. Obviously, we're in the middle of hail season. At least if you live out on the east side of Denver like me, you've probably experienced some of that hail. So there's a good chance that there's some damage to your roof thanks to all of that. Again, give Red Hawk Roofing a call today at 720-771-8921 and at least set up that free inspection and let them know DNVR sent you over there. After your roof is all taken care of, maybe you want to get away. Maybe you want to join us at the NHL draft. Maybe you want to go out there for the NHL. Does the public get to go to the NHL awards? I don't think it does. But anyway.
I think the
You can buy
actual
tickets.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
are there
you can buy
Oh, you
tickets to
can.
the
Okay.
actual like ceremony.
Yeah,
part of
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. You can go to the NHL Awards too out in Vegas. And when you go to Vegas, make sure you're staying with Circa Resorts and Casinos. They've got the unbelievable stadium swim. Even if you're not going to events, you can watch the sporting events or drafts or whatever it might be on their 90-foot television outside in the pool, sitting in the cabanas, living the dream out there in Vegas.
A 90-foot television always is striking to me because I'm like, I'm like shopping for like a 55-inch.
Right. You really have to go see it. Like, I could tell you it's 90 feet, but you go see it and you're like, oh, that's big.
All right, so this is like I don't know how many stories that is.
9? I think
It's-
10 feet is a story.
Multiple stories. Yeah. Okay, so a 9-story television.
Yeah, it's gigantic.
Okay.
It's actually ridiculous. Go check it out. Make sure you stay with Circa. They have tons of different kinds of rooms, something for everyone. Always a great place to stay. And when you go to circasports.com and use code DNVR20, you can get 20% off your stay in Vegas with Circa. Second period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast.
I just want to stay on Colton real quick.
Go ahead.
Just somebody in our Toyota chat asked, would you move him to wing? No.
That's no.
Because now he's a $4 million third line wing. He's not good enough to play in their top 6.
Yep.
That was one of the reasons why Tampa Bay had to move on from him. Because they weren't willing to pay what he was going to make as a wing.
If he's a
not
winger,
good enough for that.
if he's a winger, I'm way more interested in him as a trade piece conversation.
If we're
for
talking
sure.
about Jonathan Drouin potentially coming back at like, let's say, I don't know. I've kind of had him mentally penciled in at like 4.5, somewhere in that range.
Same.
That's a guy who pushed 60 points last year. Russ Colton has a lot of work to do to get there,
Yep.
but he's playing the less valuable position as a wing. And as we're about to get into, there are some reclamation projects out there that exist that are going to be free agents.
that could fill some of those spots.
Yeah, you need to do the Jonathan Drouin from last year.
Yep.
125K, 150K, and hope that he's a real top 6 player for you. Moving Ross Colton to wing makes less than 0 cents.
Yep.
You just can't. You're talking about a guy that's already struggling to be cost efficient, and now you've made him into a wing in your bottoms. It's just not good enough.
Yeah. Honestly, you should almost be doing the opposite, right? If you're keeping him, instead of making him a wing, you should be looking to leverage him as a center on the defensive end more effectively, like you said, on PKs and things like that.
Yeah, well, and try to get more defensive zone starts out of him. Try to take him and Middlestat and give them each, say, an extra minute, maybe 2 minutes of ice time per game. And cut into McKinnon's workload a little bit so that he's fresher come postseason.
No.
I don't think that's why he ran. I don't think that was his problem in the playoffs. I don't think he
No.
ran out of gas or anything. But
Every
anything
little
that
bit
you can
helps,
do
yeah.
to help a little bit to cut down that workload. It's like we're going to talk about with the defenders trying to take away some PK time away from Cale Makar. Why do we see a little bit more of those mistakes from him? It's because he's playing all goddamn game. You want guys who could take some of that off of his plate.
All right. Well, let's talk about one of those players. If we're sticking to the forward side first for some of these potential free agent reclamation projects, there's two that I really want to talk about from AJ's article that came out the other day, which, by the way, go read it to get AJ's thoughts on some of these guys.
Yeah, I got a lot of responses from people that skimmed the list and didn't read a word of it.
Yeah.
So it's important. It's important to read, friends.
But you're talking about Ross Colton. You're talking about potentially replacing him with some depth that can provide a little bit of offense. It's a guy you've watched a lot of recently, I know, AJ, in Jakub Vrana.
Yeah. He's an interesting profile. It's going to be a wing for you. 800K, you're going to put him on a power play. Had a major injury. He's been traded a couple of times. He's been in the player assistance program. How many more red flags? Like, it's just red flags
Yeah.
all over his profile. The fact that a bad St. Louis Blues team was better, got way better when they just were like,
We're done with this. Yeah.
we're good. That's not to say it was all his fault. They also
course.
fired their head coach, and but with Vrana, it's his speed, it's his goal scoring. That's what he does for you, especially the goal scoring.
Yep.
So as a buy low candidate, yeah, that's a guy that makes a lot of sense when you look at his positives. But his negatives, there have been a lot of conversations about attitude issues. There have been a lot of on ice results that tell you he is not just he's not very good defensively. He's the worst defensive wing in the league.
Yep.
Jared Bender might be a really good head coach, but he would have to do deity-like miracles to get this guy to be a passable defensive player at wing.
Yep.
But also, you talk about boom or bust. That's him. That's a guy, if it works for you, you love it. Can you put him into a serious environment and get him to grow up a little bit and get him in a different headspace and get him to take himself seriously and the game seriously? If you can, his talent really fits you nicely. And if you can't, 800K, you move on.
Yeah.
You put him in Loveland.
I don't love it.
I don't either, for the record. but-
Same.
Here's where you could sell me on it. PTO, see what he does in camp, then
Sure.
decide.
Sure.
Because I'd hate to see them fill an NHL contract spot with a player that just ends up in Loveland when the risk is so glaring out the gate. Like, I look at Kiviranta, and he took the patient way to getting his NHL contract and had an impact for the team. I think the PTO route isn't bad. And if you see the willingness to commit to the defensive side of the game in camp in a way that's believable to Bednar, I'd listen. But I think St. Louis, I remember being very critical of their offseason. And one of the things that I actually did like was taking this chance on Vrana.
Sure.
And I also view that as a cautionary tale, though, that it didn't work out. I think that St. Louis was sort of the crash test dummy for what does this guy still have left at the NHL level. And that's enough for me, and I'm not in the Avs front office. That's enough for me to say I wouldn't be interested in this. Just with what they have built character-wise in that locker room and knowing how important it is, doesn't feel like it would be a cultural fit out the gate. And we kind of ran into that with the concerns around Ryan Johansson, like great teammate, but concerns about the cultural fit from a work ethic perspective. And it proved to be true. I don't want to, broad brush every player that might have this concern, but just knowing how important it is to the Avs specifically, it would not interest me when there are players like Kivi Ranta out there who you at least see the work ethic, right? Like there's players like that they could give that NHL roster spot to off a PTO that I think you have less of that concern around the fit culturally.
I loved AJ's article. I didn't like that name. I told him. His article was awesome. The names were great. That one, I can see why it's inviting, because it is. There's a talent there. Here's what I'll say about him. He's at that stage now where after a while now, people know what you're about, right? Because now they figured out your game. Talking to people that I've played with him, I can tell you that his give a shit meter is really low. And in the National Hockey League, that will only take you so far. And then the asphalt stops, right? And it does. I think this is where the asphalt stops for him. There's no more road. I mean, that's it. For me, you can bring the horse to the water and you can't really, make him drink, right? Bednar, he's a genius. I love the guy. I think he should have won Coach of the Year. Sorry, talk, my buddy. But I do believe that the player has to want to be consistent and do some stuff. I don't see it with this player. I don't. Even if a guy comes on a PTO, it's great for 2 weeks. I mean, what's my assurance that you're actually going to stick to that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't see it. And then for those reasons,
The PTO is a really big incentive to be on your best behavior for about 3 weeks.
Wow, that's really hard.
Which is scary still.
That's my point. I agree with Megan and everyone. I just wouldn't touch that guy. I let somebody else touch him. I wouldn't touch him.
My
not a
problem for the Avs
And do we really want to wish that on Aaron Schneekloth and the Colorado Eagles?
have to deal
if
with
this doesn't
Vrana.
work,
Yeah,
Absolutely not.
my problem for Vrana is I think he just
Yeah.
lacks a little bit of versatility, and the Avs have proven time and time again, especially if you're looking at him as like a middle or bottom six player, they love their versatile guys that can do a lot of things. When you look at some of the successful reclamation projects they've already had, usually those guys come in and they ask them to maybe play a more passive defensive role, maybe fill in on a penalty kill, maybe add some physicality to a line. And Vrana is what he is. He's a dude that's going to skate around really fast and play only offense. Maybe there's a world if the Avs move on from Colton, they go out and find a shutdown center, and they add Logan O'Connor to that line, and you have two high-end defensive players that you try and make it work with Vrana. But now you're building your line around Vrana instead of Vrana being an accessory to that line. And that's really hard to do for me with a reclamation project.
Yeah, we always like to say you can talk about it or you can be about it, and I don't know that Vrana does either one of those things. I think he's just kind of there.
He's not about winning.
So it's Colorado might be an extreme environment for him.
Yeah. And what really makes this hard for me is the thing that he does best, goal scoring. If you want a guy that scores goals, you have other options like a Victor Olofsson out there if you're swinging on some goal scoring upside. I'm not saying they should go get him, but I'm saying what Vrana would be coming in, what his selling point is, there are other options.
No.
I like Olofsson. This was in your article.
Yeah.
I like him.
I like the other guy more. I like Kubalik more.
I spent a few minutes with it this morning. I walked away feeling Olofsson between the two. It was very close.
I think Kubalik is... You go through their careers, and Olofsson has feasted on bad teams on power plays.
Yep.
And that makes me real nervous that he's never really been a big guy at even strength. He's never been any good defensively. which is fine because we're kind of talking about that archetype here. Hey, if you're trying to get a guy that's going to score goals for you, if he was going to be able to do everything, we wouldn't be talking about him in this context, right?
Look, if you get a goal scorer and you don't put him in a position to score goals, that's on you.
Yeah,
Like,
but with Olofsson, there is a lot of evidence to suggest that he got a lot of his he did a lot of his goal scoring because Buffalo just didn't have much else at the time.
sure.
And so he was put into some really advantageous situations that he just won't be on a good team.
Certainly not the Avs.
Yeah,
They're too
he will
deep.
not
Yeah.
be in Colorado. And Kubalik is a guy that it's a little bit better. I also like he's a little bit bigger. He's had just a little bit better of a career defensively. It's not much. Like, it's not much. I'm not sitting here looking at any of these guys, Vrana, Olofsson, or Kubalik, thinking this is the slam dunk. But if I'm looking
That's
at those
kind of
three,
the point of all of these guys.
I think Kubalik is the one that I'm just like, he's the safest to give me what I want while also having an effective, like, if he bottoms out, I think I'm still getting an NHL player. And I don't know that the same is true for the other two. Because Olofsson is coming off of a year.
yeah.
It was
But, I mean,
real bad.
But the situation in Buffalo was
It
real bad.
was
That
real
Casey
bad.
Middlestat couldn't
Yeah.
save it to the point where some people in the fan base viewed negatively of him because he wasn't
Yeah.
able to resuscitate that team.
It's
And-
a very fair point. The environment was real bad.
And that's where I look at like his 5v5 possession alongside Kubalik, and I feel like Olofsson is trending in a better direction and more like consistently. Obviously, last year was bad. It still fared better than Kubalik.
We could talk about it a little bit more. First, make sure you're cracking open a nice ice cold Coors Light to chill. Sometimes the best way to look at free agents is to take a step back, relax a little bit, feel the vibes. That's the way to do it with Coors Light. Go get yourself some. The mountains turn blue, so it's literally the beer made to chill. You can get it delivered right to your front door with CoorsLight.com/DNVR, thanks to Instacart. So go check them out. They're brewed right here in Golden, Colorado, of course. So they're technically Colorado local, but you know they're Coors. They're big enough. They're everywhere in the country. If you want to get it, you can go get yourself some anywhere. Like I said, sometimes you just got to relax a little bit. Sometimes it helps you think things through the right way. If you're making decisions for Roast My Roster and you need a little bit of inspiration, maybe a Coors is the way to go. Have yourself one.
Get drunk, make a roster.
If it works for you, it works for you, you know?
Keyboard GMing at its finest.
Make the most out of the times you choose to chill and choose Coors Light. Again, you can get it delivered to you with CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Thanks to Instacart. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. And once you've got a Coors in your hand, make sure you're going in and having some fun with it. If the Avs do go out and get a Victor Olofsson, you can go to Underdog every night and choose if you think he's going to score a goal or not. You can go higher or lower on their pick'em play. Make sure to get in with Underdog, the easiest and best way to play your fantasy sports, especially when it comes to hockey. They have a ton of awesome, amazing options, including classic fantasy drafts, but they also do that pick'ems where you can pick up to, I think it's up to 8 now with their big one. Just a player and a statistic. Do you think they'll do higher or lower on that statistic on any given night? So if you feel like you have a good read on what a player might do on a night, you can go to Underdog Fantasy, you can put in a pick'em, and you can get rewarded handsomely for it. We'll put it that way. Join them today and make sure you use code DNVR when you do to get your first deposit matched up to $250 in bonus cash. Again, that's code DNVR after you scan that QR code on screen right there to get their app and sign up today. Of course, you must be 18 or older and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-522-4700 or visit npcgambling.org. Third period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast.
I was not scowling at the Euros, okay? I was looking at the Rockies game, which has about 40% of the screen cut off. So you didn't know what count it was. You don't know what inning it is. You don't know what the score is. Nothing.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
better that way. That you don't have to see
It's
what their
better to
bullpen has
know
done to the
less.
game. Yeah.
I think that's actually a great point. So I want to stay with Kubalik and Olofsson just because I think it's important to note their profiles are remarkably similar.
Like, they're the same dude.
This is purely a.
If it's one of those two, I will not be upset.
Yeah,
at all.
like I'm not gonna like I prefer Kubalik over Olofsson, but like you can't really make like a pound the table caliber of argument one over the other.
Yeah.
Their
No.
profiles are very similar. They were both in bad situations that saw head coaches fired. They both underperformed relative to expectations. It's just which one says yes?
Do you like one more? Yeah.
Is Landy already friends with Olofsson?
Yeah,
there you go.
right. Who's the guy that knows them? That knows one of them?
I mean, Middlestat.
Yeah, it's Middlestat and Olofsson have played together. So if it's Kubalik, Middlestat said no, and if it's Olofsson, Middlestat said yes.
We've solved it once
Great.
again. Any other forwards that you guys want to touch on for reclamation projects before we get into the guy and the title here?
Yeah, I mean the other one that was on there was Denis Gurianov, which I just thought
I'm good, man.
he's fast, he's big,
Sure,
he
I
can
get it.
shoot.
I'm just good.
Again, if I sign him or bring him in on a PTO, but he has to make my team. Like I'm not giving him a job.
Yeah.
I'm not signing him and putting him like, oh, he's on this line and that line. No, he's got to win a job. He's Kiviranta.
Yep.
He's like I'm higher on him than Vrana, but still only in the PTO conversation. He's not good on the
Yeah.
boards. Jared Bednar might hate him because he's
He
pretty
might.
one-dimensional.
He might.
He would need to earn that spot. There's upside, like the speed and the shot.
He's big. He really is.
That would add value. So that's why I'm not totally writing it off, and I'd be way more interested in that than Vrana on a PTO, but still not crazy about it.
He's Riley Tufty, man.
He's way better than that. But like,
archetypally, same guy.
is it not a big red flag when 4 organizations move on from a guy in the span of
Like 2.5
seasons?
years.
Yeah.
But Beauvillier is one of those names in your list
completely
that
forgot about him.
Really,
Yeah, but hold on.
really like.
What was Gurianov's contract at? What did he make last year?
I don't know. I can
I'm
look
not
it up.
sure.
Well,
I think
Billy
he-
is a contract.
Well, I think he
thought
made-
was on a cheap one.
I thought he
Yeah.
made like $2 million.
That's my point. So
Yeah,
here's what I'll say.
Beauvillier was a cap dump out of
Beauvillier is
Vancouver.
a cap dump, and again, I talked about Ross earlier. The meat, he's in the meat market. Beauvillier is right in the middle of the meat market, and that's why you get moved.
He made 2.9 in 23. Last year he was making 850.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
wow.
so Gurianov he's a suitcase, right? He doesn't really bring much, and
That's
that's why he
cold.
gets moved around.
It's cold.
Well, no, I'm being honest.
No,
I've
I
been
just-
called a suitcase 5,000 times. It's fine,
I
but
want to start calling people I don't like in my life a suitcase.
no, this guy's a suitcase. He has. I mean, that's why he moved around. Like, 'cause he doesn't bring,
All right, but have you
Enough.
considered? I know it's a couple teams removed. He is an ex-Dallas Star.
Yeah, well, I wrote in my thing, if you just describe him blankly, you're like, this sounds a whole lot like Val Nichushkin. Yeah. He's big, he can skate, he can shoot a little bit.
And he
like,
never had the upside Val was
and
touted
well,
at,
and then
but
you're
yeah.
like, okay, but Val's whole thing was he was really good defensively, and Guryanov's whole thing is he's really not.
Yeah.
well, you got to bring something. And I'll go back to, I didn't say anything about Olofsson and Kubalik, but just to touch up on them 2 seconds, Olofsson for me is a power play. Man, I'm going to be harsh again. Good player on a bad team. That's what he was. You know what I mean? Like, and
Big
Jeff
fish,
Skinner,
small pond.
Jeff Skinner, good player on a bad team. Like I at some point, you got to tip the scale where you're going to help your team make the playoffs. I understand the environment's tough, and I'll be the first one to say, like, Buffalo's been I don't want to say it, but it's been rough, right? I mean, for what, 12 years now?
It's been a city of
Is it
suitcases.
12?
I'm going to pick them to miss the playoffs again come our preseason
Well, I can't. Like, I got
previews,
screwed
so-
last year. I picked them to make it. Now I'm not picking them again. So I mean,
I did too.
I'm just like So for me, guys like that, they get the good ice. We were talking about Russ earlier. Russ gets the shitburger ice, right? He does. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. He didn't get the great ice. He doesn't get to play with the top end guys in the
Yeah.
power play, and so you're not going to get that 60-point production if you're. I say it again, shitburger ice. It is. You know what I mean? So with Olofsson, he was getting, forget about this year or whatever, but he was getting over the last few years, like power play, and that's where he got his production and all that stuff. And at some point, you gotta you got to produce when it counts, right? And those games in when? October, not when it doesn't count in April when you're out of it. So I don't know what this guy is. Like, I like him as a player, and he's never been in those situations where they're high-end pressure, right? You're going to say, oh, Middlestad either. No, awesome. But, and he did thrive. You know what I mean? But he's also, Middlestad would be younger than Olofsson, obviously. But, and then Kubalik I like. Kubalik, LA draft pick. I don't remember how he ended up in Chicago, but I do remember. And in Chicago, complimented high-end guys back then. He could play a game there with frickin' Taze and Kane, and he can compliment those guys, and he's a frickin' smart player. We were looking at him yesterday, AJ. What did we say? He had that big season. Was it in? He scored 30, right? Was it in Detroit?
Yeah, his rookie year, he scored 30.
Yeah, but then he ended
shot
up
19%.
Yeah, which is fine. He still did it.
Bad hockey team. Yeah.
That year? Chicago was not.
Yeah, they were bad. They weren't
That
like
year?
cataclysmically bad, but
Yeah,
they were bad.
They also that was the Chicago team that should not have been in the postseason and ended up making it with the weird bubble playoffs.
Yeah.
Kubalik had 8 points in 9 games in the postseason.
I always liked him. I like him. I like that player. Smart player. Two-way guy.
It's the only playoff profile between those guys that we have here. That's it.
That
We
is
have 9 games between two
True.
guys.
That's
And his
true.
contract got in the way. That's why he was gone. Contract got in the way. Then he went 1 year in Detroit, then Ottawa.
Yeah.
I'll take a chance on him any day. Good person, smart player.
Take a chance
Can
on either one of
score.
those guys, honestly. Like, if July 1st rolls around and they give both of those guys 1 year, $1 million, I'm going to laugh. But
Well, Olofsson's got a sick shot, too, for the power play. Like a great shot.
that's what they do. Like, that's what those two guys are there for. They're there to score you goals.
They got great shots. They can
And you
score.
don't have any of the Vrana concerns, but you don't have any of the Vrana upside either.
Yeah, but that upside doesn't go anywhere.
No.
Something Eric said kind of, I think, wraps us back around to Beauvillier, which was where this conversation was going. Beauvillier isn't a guy who got all the good ice on a bad team. He's a guy who has played a little bit further down some lineups in his career. And, obviously last year was no bueno for him. But his time on the island, there was a lot of hype. There was some upside to him. He's a guy that, it maybe starts to make sense. If you're talking about filling in your lineup, replacing some of the stuff that Ross Colton does, can Beauvillier provide some of that for Colorado in theory, at least?
Well, the reason that guy bounced around is exactly what I've been describing this whole show. On the island, he's on his entry-level deal, and he's performing, he's doing well, and he's well-liked by the coaches, and you're not going anywhere. You're not. And then you reach a certain status where you have Arbrights, and then you sign that deal, and then he's in the $4 million range. Money's great, but now you're susceptible to get moved. And that's what happens to guys like that. And then all of a sudden, he gets moved here, and he becomes the suitcase we're talking about. Boom, boom, boom. And it's hard, man. It's hard. And then he just hasn't found a good nest the last couple teams he's been on. But, I mean, if you're talking about a guy taking a chance that can play, that could be a good fit for the Avs, that's a good fit,
Of all the guys on this, he's my favorite.
He's my favorite. When I made the 4-team comparison, it's just because it's very specifically 4 teams and 14 months for Beauvillier, but very different.
A fair point.
But because he's coming off of a 3x4 contract, you don't know what kind of money that he's expecting. Because can he be agreeable to go to a team in a high competitive window like the Colorado Avalanche with a chance at a better role?
Yeah.
And seeing what happened to Jonathan Drouin, that's the vibe I get. Like, in the way that Girnov sounded like Nichushkin on paper and felt like Galchenyuk in reality, Beauvillier feels like Jonathan Drouin to me. His speed is so complementary to what the Colorado Avalanche like to do.
Honestly, he's a guy I'd even be willing to take a little bit more of a chance on. Like, a lot of these guys, it's like, hey, here's your $850K league minimum. If Beauvillier was like, hey, 1.2.
I mean, 1.5 is not a deal breaker for me with Beauvillier. He's gonna play. He's gonna play in your top 9.
100%.
I would agree.
Probably gonna play in your top 6.
I would agree. I do wonder. You start to have to thinking about the cap at that point and what else you're doing in your lineup.
Yeah.
But I don't disagree with Beauvillier. I think it would be pretty easy to get value out of him. I'll put it that way.
I think so.
If
His
you're-
fit is so natural.
Yeah.
If your opening night top six or your opening night second line features Beauvillier, Middlestat, and Duran, you're fine. And then if one of those guys comes back, if they both come back, it's not like Beauvillier no longer has a place in your lineup. He plays elsewhere.
Yep.
So, yeah, easily my favorite of those guys, too.
All right.
But Beauvillier and Kubalik,
Just do both.
I don't hate it.
it's cheap.
You need a center, though, if you're moving Colton.
I'm not even worried about the moving Colton part until
Okay.
Colton gets moved.
And the other side of that is, if you're bringing in these guys, you do start to get a little bit crowded at the wing at a certain point.
Yeah.
You have Miles Wood. You have a Logan O'Connor that will be back next year. You have a Nikolai Kovalenko.
Poor Kovalenko.
Just going to get pushed out again. It's something to think about when
Win a
it comes
job,
to
man.
roster construction.
That's it, man.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. That more or less covers the forward side of the conversation. The guy I put in the title, though, is John Klingberg. I don't disagree with the noise you just made,
People got mad at me for this.
but he
Yeah.
barely played last year.
Yeah, I was like, geez, guys.
Only 14 games for the Leafs last year. Just did not get into the lineup for various reasons across the course of the year.
Primarily being a bad hip injury that
Yeah.
caused him to have season-ending surgery in December.
Yep.
That's important.
You look back a couple of years, and he's probably not the guy he was in Dallas.
He's definitely not.
But still, when he was healthy, capable of providing some solid offensive ability on your back end. Does he make sense for Colorado, though?
It's like Klingberg versus Sam Malinsky at this point.
Yeah.
Klingberg is definitely a PTO guy. Klingberg is a PTO guy the same way Jack Johnson was a PTO guy when he first got to Colorado. He
Can
needs
he
to get
skate?
here
Yeah.
and find out if he's healthy.
Yep.
Because if he's healthy, I like the idea of Klingberg in a limited role.
Sure.
There are other guys that'll be ahead of him.
Mm-hmm.
When you saw him in Minnesota, he wasn't like a train wreck.
Yeah.
He was a train wreck in Anaheim, and he couldn't move in Toronto. But at the end of his time in Minnesota, I could live with it. And as a bottom pairing guy with some offensive upside to him, you throw him all the Colorado stuff in there, and you're like, this is an easy fit if he can move. If the hip is clean, if he can skate. As a PTO guy, I'm good with this.
No arguments.
I look at how Anaheim parted with him, and the trade warranted only a 4th-round pick, 50% salary retention. That communicates to me what value he holds around the league.
It was bad.
And so that's one of those cautionary tales that I talk about, that I'm looking at that keenly, internal conversations. That's what the kind of return looks like. It's concerning to me. And I look at the way structurally Minnesota is designed defensively, and I can maybe expect some of that success that he had, limited success in Minnesota, to the stingy defensive structure that exists there, kind of sheltering him a little bit. The concern is the steady decline in ice time for the past 3 seasons prior to the surgery is a concerning trend. And then I look at the nature of the surgery, a bilateral hip surgery. Puljujärvi had the same surgery, and they say 5 to 6 months is the timeline. For Puljujärvi, it was realistically more like 8, and he played in just 35 games this last season. At 26 years old for Puljujärvi, that's a lot less mileage on a 31, 32-year-old John Klingberg. It's the PTO conversation.
Yeah.
It's worth looking at to see how healthy he actually is, because based on a December timeline for the surgery, that still means 8 months out is around August. That could mean he is healthy enough to participate in a camp, and you see what you have in this player. There are some red flags, but not so many that he's not a player I wouldn't be interested in seeing on a PTO. I loved Jack Johnson PTO year 1. So I'm not, how that aged after the fact, I didn't love, but if it played out in a similar way to the Jack Johnson PTO, I don't hate it for the type of role that he would be filling in Colorado. It would be different, too, from what he's played in the past. And I think he appears to be comfortable with that, with where he's at in his career too. It's just a lot of red flags. So I think, the comments that are going crazy on you are probably just looking at the red flags and not looking at the fact that this could be an intriguing third pairing option.
Yeah.
I liked LIKED, the player back then. I did. Actually, really liked him. Pushed for him many times. My type, my type. Could fix his tooth here in Colorado. We have good dentists, Here's my take with him. And what I've seen over the years, guys like that are not, I don't know how to say it, like guys like that are not overly big. And, I'm not saying he's small.
Yeah.
But once they hit it, and when I say hit it, it's like the end of the road, like they hit it and their game suffers. You know what I mean? And then for him, it was that hip injury and he hasn't been the same. And I think that, I would give him a PTO, see where he's at. I got no problem with that,
Yeah.
But what I think is he would have to alter his game. You know what I mean? What makes him Klingberg? What made him Klingberg? Like, a valuable asset in the NHL. Where I do believe that where he's at in his career with his age and the mileage he has on him, an injury like that would make him alter his game. And at that point, if you're, just actually putting a gun to my head and you're asking me what is it, I take Sam Malinsky. You know what I mean? And that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? That's
Healthy.
kind of where I'm at.
Young.
Healthy,
And again,
younger,
bring him in on a PTO,
is
see where
also
he's at. I got
cheap,
no
like-
problem. Yeah.
The other thing, Megan, you're talking about the timeline too. If you bring him in on a PTO, you sign him, Sam Malinsky can still play for you. And John Klingberg can continue to get healthy while practicing and whatever. You're going to have an injury at some point.
definitely true.
You don't love the idea that Sam Malinsky or John Klingberg is then going to be in your top 4, but that's every team in the league is looking at their third pair and go, well, if we wanted those guys in our top 4, they would be.
I think you can start judging them with the Minnesota Anaheim years, and I think it's not fair to judge them from last year in Toronto, where he clearly was not healthy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the people in Toronto, man, oh man, did they hate him. Holy cannoli, they wanted this guy out of the lineup. The fans
they
I'm
hate
talking
everybody
about.
too.
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying, but it was I felt bad for the guy, for a
hateful
veteran
group of
player.
people.
I felt bad for him. It was bad.
It was real bad.
Unless you're confident he's going to be definitively better than Sam Malinsky, I just don't think it makes a ton of sense.
That's what I'm saying. PTO, he moves well enough in
no
preseason.
problem with that.
You sign him, and then you kind of just let him slowly
But-
work his way into it. Do I have confidence that would happen?
But you're probably looking at him as a 7 then, and then you need to talk about going out and getting a guy like your guy and Oliver Shillington, or a guy like my guy and Matt Grzelczyk, or something like that.
Yeah, or Mike Riley.
Megan's guy, Mike Riley.
Well, and those are like
He's my
Shillington
favorite.
and
I
Riley
love
are like
him.
this tier of I don't know if that would even be possible,
Sure.
but I'd sure
Yeah.
like if it was.
Yeah.
And that would be where that contract slot is given sooner than a Klingberg on a PTO.
For sure.
Like similarly, there's this tier in between where I would even entertain Dumba, to AJ's article's point, sooner than Klingberg, depending on Dumba's money. What's the ask? It has to come in similarly low, which coming off his last contract, I don't know if he's interested in that, but
If Klingberg is a July 1 signing in Colorado,
That would be tough.
I'm frustrated.
Yeah.
But Matt Dumba, a July 1 signing,
I still wouldn't love it, but it'd be better than Klingberg.
I'm at least intrigued.
feel more. I'd have less question marks about what you're getting out of Dumba,
Yeah.
and just concerned then about like what kind of money is that
for sure.
taking away from the rest of the lineup that has other holes to fill.
Yeah. Agreed.
And also, I just really want to see Simolinski get a chance. So I don't want anything to like be such a question mark that it comes at the expense also of Malinsky's opportunity. It has to be such a surefire, better thing than what Malinsky could offer.
I think the real rub here for me that's developing is all these guys that we're talking about outside of Dumba are offensively oriented guys. Like first, like that's their hallmark is the skating and the puck moving. That's what Sam Malinsky's game is. putting them next to each other. Like, I love Mike Riley. I have for such a long time. If that guy wanted to come to Colorado, I would finally be able to rest. It would be wonderful, right? Like,
Yep.
I would love that. But Mike Riley and Sam Malinsky on a third pairing is a soft pairing.
Sure.
It's just soft. And then you have Sam Girard on your second pairing. Sam Girard, I think, is really effective. He is wildly underrated by a portion of the Avalanche fan base. He's soft. He's a soft player. It's not hard to play against him. Devon Taves and Cale Makar are not, Cale Makar will drop a depth charge on a guy's chest every once in a while. But those are not guys that are really physical players. They're not physically punishing. It's Josh Manson. At that point, it's just Josh Manson.
Yep.
On this
Whiskey.
one little own island, the only guy drinking anything close to whiskey. The other ones are all drinking wine coolers.
This is why they need to draft Charlie Ellick.
Which will help in 4 years.
I know it's not close,
But this is kind of my. I don't know if we're going to get that guy in free agency or if Sam Malinsky's going to end up getting pushed out purely because of style problems, or if he just starts as the 7. If Sam Malinsky starts as the 7, I'm also okay. Like, I don't need to ink Sam Malinsky into the third pairing before the offseason happens.
Let him fight. Let him fight.
Yeah, let him knock that door down.
He has to earn a job. He's got a better path than Jean-Luc Foudy and Oscar Olofsson.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, win a goddamn job. Outplay some dudes. If you're going to be in the NHL, you need to beat out some borderline guys to prove you belong in the NHL.
While he does have to earn his spot, we are also facing a reality where the Avs need to start getting value out of these guys in their organization on cheap contracts. Malinsky's a little bit of a different conversation because he's 26. He's not a 22-year-old that's trying to break into the league. But the reality is, when you are trying to continue a cup window and stretch it out as far as you can, the most direct way to do that is internally. You can't give the $1 million to Andrew Cogliano. You can't give $1.2 million to Brandon Duhaime indefinitely, because every one of those eats up that little bit more of cap until you run out of space.
The extra $300K on 3 deals is $900K.
Yep.
Math live on air. Boom. That's a contract.
Yep.
So you have to be careful with it. People always give me shit because I was unhappy about the Helm and Cogliano, whatever. But those decisions matter. Last year, they were like Chris McFarland played hardball for the first time in his negotiating career, where he went and he was like, minimum deals.
Yep.
Minimum deals, $800K, $825K, and all those savings mattered. They had the flexibility to get a little wild at the trade deadline, so they did. It helps.
It does. Now, with that being said,
Please go get a 4C.
if you think a guy can be a difference maker in your lineup, you go and make the move.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So, I don't know.
Easiest way to get a 4C, though, is freaking develop one. You know what I mean? Just freaking develop one. Bring him along. Make him ready. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which I don't think there is one right now. But
The Avs have always struggled to develop depth forwards. Logan O'Connor's kind of the only one. And
Yeah, Logan O'Connor was a 23-year-old undrafted free
Right.
agent. You only get partial credit on that exam.
Exactly. He
Yep.
came in and just surprised them into that.
Tyson Jost didn't
Yeah.
work out.
Yep.
JT Compher worked out. I mean, he went through your AHL
Right.
system and was good for you.
And great. You developed a middle six player. You didn't develop a grinder.
well, develop a fourth line guy.
Yeah.
Come on.
Not that,
Mold 'em.
like, obviously, if you would love a guy to be more than a fourth liner, but you look through some of the guys that they've missed out on, the Shane Bowers immediately comes to mind of these depth level
Too soon.
players. I know, but particularly at the center position.
Well, like Newhook, right alongside the Ross Colton is getting traded conversation. People were immediately like, and this is why they shouldn't have moved on from Newhook, as if this has already happened too, that Colton has been moved. And it's tough because I look at what happened with Newhook, and I liked him a lot as a player. I did, but his path was tricky because the role he seemed built to play was in the top 6,
Yeah.
but that wasn't available to him yet, and he
Yep.
couldn't figure out middle 6 depth role
Yep.
in Colorado.
Edner didn't want to have the patience with
That's
it.
still what would need to be asked of
But
him.
his number's going to be right there, too. What's his number at this year?
Yeah, I don't know.
Newhook.
2.9.
Signed this year.
Yeah.
Then going into his RB.
Oh, he's got
next
3
year.
more years at 2.9.
Yeah, they got him for 4
Yeah, they
years.
signed him. It's his old agent, Kent. Yes,
And he
Kent
looked
signed him.
real good before
He did look-
the injuries.
Yeah, no,
And
he
after.
had a good year.
And after, too. Yeah. But,
His point per game pace was that of a 50-point player.
Yep.
They're going to end up winning that deal.
You
Happy
knew it
for
when
him.
it was made.
They're going to, I don't want to say winning. They're going to be happy with that deal.
Yeah, I think they'll be happy with
A
it.
first and a second round pick that turned into Mikhail Guliev and Ross Colton.
Avs are happy.
Could
Yeah.
end up being a pretty good deal for them, too.
Yeah.
We do have one super chat here from Melanie saying, "Hi, friends. I've been catching a lot of replays, but wanted to say thanks for the content. Take care. Always appreciate you, Melanie."
Thanks, Melanie.
It's good stopping point for today's show, so we are going to wrap this one up. We are off tomorrow, no podcast, but we will be back Monday with Roast My Roster. So this weekend, make sure you get your rosters in on Cap Friendly. Put DNVR in the title of your roster. We'll make sure to look at it, and we'll choose the best ones, and we'll break them all down on Monday. We should have a video coming out tomorrow, too. It'll be a fun one. More Avs 1.0 interviews. We talked to a guy way smarter than any of us on this show, so be fun. Go check out that video tomorrow. Go check out AJ's pieces over on thednvr.com. Then lots of stuff leading up to draft and free agency next week. So we will see you on the next one.
We all silly like the mayor.